So hello everyone, in this video I want to show how to create a synced flashlight which you could look up and down to like this. And one more thing, you would see that this is server, so it's 0 millisecond, and this one is 400 millisecond. That is because in my emulation, if you check in here in my network emulation, I have set it to be bad, which means like very high lag, and you would see that it still feels good even with that emulation. So if I do this, let me close the server flashlight, and you would see that this is the client, right? And as soon as I press F, it starts on my screen, and then for the server it's a bit delayed because it needs to receive the message, right? Same with if I do 3 players. Let me move my server here, let me move my client here, and let me move my client to here. And you would see that if I start this flashlight, you would see that other two is a bit delayed, which is very normal because again I've set it to be like 400 milliseconds, right? But for the player who is controlling the character, it's an instant for him, you could see. And this is a weird mistake that I had done in the past, where I would wait for the server to send me the message instead of instantly showing this for the client. And this is how you will make your flashlight. And you could see it's a bit laggy because again 400 milliseconds, right? So it's like 400, then it reaches there, and then it sends around here like this or something. So there's like almost 800 milliseconds of difference. But again, this is like very high ping environment, which is why if you do something like average, it will not feel that bad. I even tested with my friends and it works properly. You'd see it's now good. So let's start making it. I have actually created an empty project already, which is a flashlight tutorial, and I will be providing this file in my Patreon, which is fairly new, so there isn't much, but I do plan on adding everything that I do on my channel on Patreon. Some would be free, some would be paid. You could already find like 2 of the free stuff that I made there. But again, if you want to get the files, consider getting the membership of my Patreon. It's only $5 per month, and hopefully I do plan on creating at least 1 video a week. So first of all, let me just do some settings. So for the directional light, I would before that let's just add our post-process volume. Okay, our post-process volume is there. I will set the infinite to unbound. You could search for infinite. And then for the exposure, so we will set it to something low so that we can reduce the brightness of a whole screen, not this low. We have to first set it to manual. That's why it was looking weird. So manual, and then we can control the exposure like this, maybe a bit more, like 5. And then our directional light, I will basically make it be bluish color in a darker tone so that it's a bit darker. Looks like this. Again, you could play around with the light and all, and how much you want and all that stuff. Okay, so if I do play now, I have a player which is a first person character which basically does this. So let's go to a first person blueprint. This is going to be a first person character. Let's go in here, and we would see one thing, that we already have a camera around here. And what we need to do is, this is the camera that actually controls where we see, right? So we can actually add a flashlight to this guy. Okay, so let's go in here and add our flashlight, spotlight, like this, to our first person camera. The first person camera is automatically connected to the head of the first person mesh. I will reduce the outer cone angle and then increase the inner cone angle, something like this. Let's see how this looks. It's a very small right now. Let's increase this, maybe like 35-30. And this one I'll just make it like very huge. This is just like your preference, just so that I can see for this video. And you could see that if I look down, it looks down. If I do left, it looks left. If I look up, it looks up. Maybe I duplicate this so that we can see properly. There, if I look up, I can look up, down, and all that stuff. We can also increase the attenuation a bit, reduce this. Let's do like 25-20, and we get like a flashlight. Okay, now if I, let's say, go into my listen server, I do 2 players, I do I mean, I'll keep in medium, okay, so that my PC works properly while recording. And you would see one thing, that we now got one guy who has flashlight, but it is not synced for up and down. You can see it is not getting synced for up and down, because by default our what you call our camera, which is what the user sees, like for which the playing user sees, it's not synced up and down. It's only synced by the character like this. Okay, so it's only left and right for now. If you check our camera, you can see by default they have given it like -90 and 90 around here, because if you do 0 0, it is like this. Okay, which is kind of annoying. What this means is that, for example, you can see that our characters are already syncing left and right, right? So we only need to sync up and down, which is this pitch value. If it was 0 0, I think everything was 0 0, it would have been the pitch value, I believe, or one of it, which would be like up and down. But we don't have that, because by default in the newer version, I think they have done -90 -90. And instead of that, instead of just sending one value, I basically just send all three, so that it gets synced properly. But again, if you make your own mesh and your own character, instead of using the default third person character, just make sure your flashlight or your camera is set to 0 0 0. If you make the mesh like proper in your own game, then you do not need to change the camera's direction and all that stuff. Okay, so for now I'm just going to send all three details, but you can obviously do with just sending one of the float values if you do properly when you create the character. So let's go to our event graph, and before that let's go to our I think it's added in the input there. It's in the input default, IMC default. Here you could see jump, move and lock. These are all the keys there are. Let's create our own input called IA and toggle flashlight. This one is just going to be bool, because it should be enabled or closed. So let's go to our default and let's add our input flashlight, toggle flashlight, and then open this, and I'm going to set the key as F. Okay, so now when we press F, I want it to start the flashlight and close the flashlight. So if I go to this character, and you could see that if you go to something like your controller, first person controller, you would see that by default they have added the IMC default in the player controller. So because it's added in the player controller, it gets added to all players automatically, like this IMC default. And when we added our flashlight in here, it automatically is going to start for our flashlight character, this first person character. So if I just search here toggle flashlight, we get this enhance input, and then all we need to do is we need to get our spotlight, and I'm going to actually create a variable called flashlight on, like on question mark, like this. So for now I'm not doing multiplayer. For now let's just do basic and then slowly convert it to multiplayer. We'll get our flashlight on, is it on or off? Okay, and then we will do opposite of it. Okay, so obviously there is something called flip-flop too, flip-flop, where you could basically make it enabled once and then disabled once. But I also like to do this, where if this is true, it will basically convert it to false. If it's false, it will convert it to true. We'll get a spotlight, which is this guy. We'll do set visibility like this, and we will basically just set this directly around here when we start it. Okay, now it would not work because we also need to change this when we change it, right? So let's go in front of this. Let's go and do set. So if you hold Alt, you could basically get the set instead of dragging and clicking. When we click this, we actually want to do reverse of whatever it was, and then basically set this as the new visibility. Okay, so when we click the first time, so by default it's false, right? So when we click on the first time, it will check, okay, it's false, so let me turn this into true, and now it will set it to true. That's going to be our visibility. Next time we click again, this is now true, so it will convert it to false and then set this like this. Okay, so basically we are reversing it all, and you could see that it works, but it's not synced. Okay, you can see it's not synced. and you could see it works properly like this. I should also make it visibility half spotlight to be off by default. Okay, so right now we got it to work for single player. So this is how you can make for single player. Basically it didn't load properly. You can see now this works, but it's not synced. You can see it's not synced. So this is what we basically are going to do, but now we want to convert it into multiplayer. So what we will do is, I'm actually going to make a mistake purposefully, but here's what we need to do. First of all, we need to create a custom event, and this is going to be called toggle flashlight server. Okay, and we will actually convert this into server, so it will only run on server. So even though we want to change the spotlight using our rep notify, which is, if you go in here in the replication, which is rep notify. If you guys don't know about rep notify, what it basically is that it will only send the information when this boolean changes. So if this boolean changes from true to false, then it will send the message to every other character that, hey, this boolean has changed, do this. And this is important to use rep notify for flash, because in case, let's say your player is let's say player 1 is starting the flash. So if the player 1 has flash on, let's say the player 1 has the flash on, and then the player 2 joins a bit late. If you do not use rep notify, and if you use something called RPC, which is like run on server and then multicast, if you do that method, then what would happen is that the player who joined late would not get the updated value. So if he joined late, he would just see that the flashlight is off even though it was on. And it is also if the players were like very far, because there's something called relevancy. You would see there's something called I think it's somewhere around here. Okay, I'm also not familiar with relevancy like this one, so we do not have always relevant, but basically when something gets like very far, the information is not sent, because if someone is like very far, we do not really want to tell that, hey, turn the flashlight on of the player 2, because if the player 1 is like very far. So we will use something called rep notify, so that basically whenever the notification is changed or boolean is changed, it will always update. Whether you join late or whether the player is far, it would always be working. So the way rep notify works is that you have to do using server. You cannot directly do it. It is always server who changes it. So let's do run on server, and we'll basically do is set with rep notify like this, and we will do the same step that we did before, which is we will do not boolean, and then it will basically set this as a rep notify. Now when you converted this into rep notify, a function was created in here. Okay, a function gets created whenever rep notify is done. If I double click on it, it's a function. So this function gets called whenever the boolean has changed. So in this one, we will actually get our flashlight, whichever it is, because you can see that we have already set it as whatever is it's opposite of this one. So if it's on, it will turn to false. If it's false, it will turn to true, and whatever we get, this is going to be called. And we'll basically get a spotlight and do set visibility like this. Now remember, there's one extra step that I want to show for lag compensation. So till now this would work properly, but we still have to do some stuff, and we also have to sync up and down. And once we have done, we need to call this function toggle flashlight on server when we click this button. So whenever we click this, it is basically asking the server, hey, can I do this or do this basically. So the client, when client presses F, it will ask the server to do this, and then server will basically be like, okay, I'm checking your flashlight, I'm doing opposite. And once it's done, he'll say that, hey, the boolean has changed, everybody do this. Okay, so now if I go in here and if I do F, you would see it works. Let me just check one thing. Okay, it works directly. Okay, and you could see it works properly. It works, but why I'm not able to see the player? Is it way too dark? Okay, it's way too dark, that's why. But you could see now it's synced, but I'm going to show one problem right now. Okay, so let's go to our editor. Let's go to network and enable network emulation for everyone, so that all server and clients, and do bad, basically very high ping which would be like I think 400 500 ping maybe, I don't know. But now you would see one thing, that this is server, so it feels instant. It feels instant when it's a server. Obviously it's the message gets sent late to the client, but that's like normal when we have high ping. But I'm pressing F now, and you could see it didn't feel instant for me. I'm going to say F whenever I press F. Okay, F, 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 F. You could see, and in middle it also was delayed because we didn't really receive the next updated information yet. So this is a problem when you use like just RPC to do this, if you have like say high ping. But the thing is, Flashlight is not like currency, right? Where let's say you're buying something, or when you're leveling up something, that then you want the server to first do the calculation and send it. But Flashlight doesn't really need that. So what we can do is, and this is something I had made mistake in my project. So what we are going to do is, before we do this toggle Flashlight server, we will actually do is we will make the local one be active. Okay, so we will take our like Flashlight on, and we are not going to set. Okay, we are not going to set, we are just going to take it whatever the value is, and then we'll get a spotlight, and we'll do set visibility on started, and we'll do the next toggle this, and we'll send the new visibility like this. So right now what I'm doing is I'm not actually changing the Flashlights, this option like Flashlight variable. I'm not changing this, like I'm not setting this. You can see I'm just taking whatever it is and basically giving it directly to the visibility. So this runs without telling the server that I want to change it. And this one also doesn't let the server, this one doesn't send the server that I'm changing it or anything. This is what handles that, hey, I'm changing the value around here. So this one is responsible for letting the server know that I have changed my Flashlight, and let other users or other players also know that. But this one is just for local. So what we'll do is, now if I press F, you can see it feels instant, like F, 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 F. Now one thing I want you guys to know, that if you spam F, let's say, it's not going to work instantly. Like let's say if I'm around here and I spam F, you can see it does not work instantly, because this boolean, right, this boolean which is Flashlight on, is only getting set by the server. We do not change it in here. Okay. so let's say if this was false, this turns to true, and it sends the visibility to be true, and our Flashlight starts. And then we send the server to do the same thing, but the server is the one that's responsible for changing our our boolean. So I hope you guys understand that what we have done. This is just for local, this is just for a visual stuff, so that we say it quickly, and this is actually the one that handles the changing of the variables. But now we need to do is make it go up and down. Okay, like sync up and down. Okay, like this. So let's go to our first person character, and let's create another rep notify, and I'm going to call this as Flashlight controller or something like that. I'm going to change this into a rotator, and that is because I'm going to send all three values to all other players. Okay, there's no direct option, because by default of the first person camera is not synced, because again, it doesn't make sense why you would be syncing all first person camera. So by default it's not done there. Okay, but we'll get a Flashlight controller, and we'll also change this to rep notify. Basically means that when it is changed, then only send to the all other players. Now the thing is, like I said before, if you make the player in a better way, then you do not need to actually send all three values. You only need to send like one of the values, which is going to be up and down value. But for this default one, I'm just going to use all three values, because there's like -90, and I don't know how they have made the, for example, it doesn't even face like the right direction. I feel like the mesh doesn't feel it's facing the right direction and all that stuff. So I'm just going to send all three values, and as soon as we created rep notify, this one was created, remember? So we'll get our flashlight controller like this. We'll get our flashlight controller variable. We'll get our spotlight and we'll set its world rotation to this one, like this flashlight controller. You can see we'll set it to this one for this. But again, this is going to actually create one problem that I want to show you again with the lag related stuff. Okay, if we go to event graph now, we need to change the flashlight controller, right? So I'm going to do it on my mouse look. So whenever I move my mouse, I'm going to run an event called custom event change flashlight controller or something like that. Rotation, I should have written rotation, but whatever. We'll run on server because the server is the one that handles changing variables. We'll get and set this like this by holding alt and set with notify, right? Then we'll get our controller rotation. So let's get our controller. How's it like? Get control rotation. This one basically gives wherever we are looking at, and this is like better than using any other like syncing, like examples, getting this rotation and doing it, then it might not sync properly. But we'll get a control rotation, which is basically wherever we are looking. Add this around here and do a set with notify. Okay, and once we have done this, we actually need to run this event whenever we use mouse look. Okay, so whenever we move our mouse, we will basically sync this. This is for I think thumbstick and all, then you will also need to add around here. Okay, but for me, I'm just doing for mouse right now. Let's do is what was it? Flashlight controller. Change flashlight controller. Let me name it rotation. Now let's try playing it and let's see if it syncs. So again, I am playing in like bad network, right? So just for testing, and you can see it now looks up, down, it syncs. If I do like random stuff, you would see it syncs properly. If I do up and down, left and right, up, down like this, it syncs for the server. And if I go in here, you would see it now syncs too. But again, one issue you would see that for me, the flashlight seems a bit delayed for the client, you can see. And the reason for that is simply because this event, which is like set with notify, this one is actually happening for everyone. So what's happening is the client is sending the server that my rotation has changed. So like this one, this is the client, right? So the client is sending that my rotation is changed. Then the server checks it, and then when it tries to send the new rotation to everyone, it's also sending back to the client one, like this client. And then what it does is that it tries to get back to the location that the server sent. So what we need to do is in our rep notify, we'll use something called get local controller. Okay, is locally controlled. So what this means is that is this player locally controlled, which means is this player controlled by you. So if there are 5 players, the one that is controlled by you is the local controlled, and anything that is other one is the not locally controlled basically. So if you do a branch, you could hold B to quickly add branch, and if it's false, which means that if it is not me, if it's someone else, then only set the rotation to that one. So what this basically means is that we are not going to change our camera location or our flash location for ourselves, but only do it for the other players. So if I go now around here, we still receive the message called rep notify, but it basically just does not update the location for us. Okay, because it comes here. For example, this is the locally controlled right now. So it will only update the one that is not locally controlled, which is this guy. But you could see for this one it is pretty fast. Again, it is also the server, so it's fast. And if I do 3 players, let's do, I'm purposefully using like higher ping, okay? It's not going to be this high ping for you guys, hopefully. It's like 400, 500 ping emulation right now. And you could see for this guy too. You could say sometimes it gets delayed to send this message because again 400 ping, it's a bit way too excess to kind of see this. But you can see it now is going to sync properly. Okay, so I'm looking at the player, I'm looking left, I'm looking up, I'm looking down, and it basically syncs, and it is only going to update for the rest of them. So even though we receive this message, like this message is also received by ourselves, but it checks that okay, it was my it was my control rotation, so I'm not going to do anything for me. It's only happening to the other players. So this is how you can actually do rep notify for the flashes and stuff. So if you want to get this file, check the Patreon and you will get the file. And yeah, that's all for video. Thanks for watching.